This final poem that will be fully analyzed is called The Raven, one of Edgar's most famous pieces of poetry. In 1845, he published The Raven in 2 newspapers at once. It's a lyrical narrative poem about a student who goes mad questioning a bird about his lost love Lenore, but he kept getting one answer, nevermore. This poem became instantly popular. In only a few months, it was published multiple times in newspaper after newspaper. By the end of the century, it would be translated into almost every European language. It became the most popular and famous lyrical poem from America. It's late in the year and late at night. A man is sitting alone in his room reading but is falling asleep and trying to forget his lost love Lenore, but he hears something knocking at the door. He calls it apologizing to the visitor he imagines must be outside. Then he opens the door and finds nothing. It freaks him out a little and thinks it's just the wind, so he opens the window and in flies a raven. The raven settles in on a statue above the door, and for some reason the man's first instinct is to talk to it. He asks for its name and surprisingly the raven answers back with a single word, nevermore. The bird's vocabulary is pretty limited to the word nevermore. Each question he asks is more painful and personal. The raven doesn't change his story and the man loses his sanity. Lenore is the main focus of the speaker's obsessive thoughts. He brings her up constantly, and even when he tries to think about something else, he always ends up back to her. You don't learn that much about her, and you don't hear what she looks like or how she is related to the speaker. She's merely an idea, a memory. It's not only the title of the poem, but even once you've heard all about Lenore and the man in his room, it's probably the image that the raven sticks out the most. The raven, therefore, can be said to symbolize loss, despair, or death, but it is important to know how the raven suits the speaker's mournful tone and tormented thoughts. Some may say the raven is made into a symbol by the narrator himself. This is a really carefully organized poem. Let's take a closer look at the first 6 lines since it gets repeated throughout the poem. The rhyming words in bold. The first and third lines have a rhyming word at the middle and at the end of the line. It's called an internal rhyme. And in the fourth line, the rhyme from the third line shows up in the middle of the sentence. The most noticeable rhyme in the poem comes at the end of the second, fourth, fifth, and sixth lines in each stanza. It's easy to pick out because it's always an or sound. That means 2/3 of the lines in the poem end with the same sound. This rhyme scheme would be called ABCBBB, with each letter standing for the sound that ends in a line. Now for the meter, you can start by counting out the number of syllables. The first and third lines have 16 syllables each, and that makes 8 pairs of syllables. The emphasis in these pairs is usually placed on the first syllable. This kind of syllable pair is called a trochee. Since there are 8 syllables, you can call it an octameter, so it is called a triadic octameter. The room in this poem feels like the perfect place for someone to be alone with their thoughts. Edgar doesn't describe what exactly this room is, but it is imagined to be a library, shelves piled high with old books. You could imagine the spooky light from the lanterns playing over the scene, making everything seem even more stranger and more exciting. Doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. This alliteration added tension and complements the tone of the poem. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming. This example of a simile helps the reader envision the evilness of the raven, or how the narrator himself views the raven. And the silken sad and certain rustling of each purple curtain. This example of assonance is considered to add to the rhythm of the poem, creating a certain tone. Night's Plutonian shore. This allusion references Pluto, the Roman god of the dead, showing one of the many examples of death in Poe's poem. This man loves a woman named Lenore. That's part of the good balance of this poem. You realize it is just a man who only wants one thing in the world, to be back with the woman he loves. But that's the one thing he can't have. It is a depressing look at love, and while Poe never even uses the word directly, love is still shown in this poem. Now you know this poem is famous and important, but is considered more than that. Edgar Allan Poe really knows how to create a mood to make his readers feel the emotions he intended. This is a poem that pulls you into the moment. This is all about making you feel like you're experiencing the story.
created using Powtoon.